Chapter 28. Faithful ends his pilgrimage. When the morning came, Christian and Faithful were taken to the governor's court, where the judge sat every day to try any prisoners who might be brought to him. He was an old man with a hard and cruel face, and like the governor, he hated the king and all his pilgrims. Christian and Faithful were brought before him with their hands chained, and he asked where they had come from and what they'd been doing. Then a boy named Envy, who had been one of the first to run after the little pilgrims and tease them, rose up and began to answer the judge's questions. He said he had known Christian and Faithful when they were living at home, and that they were disobedient and quarrelsome, and did not honor the wicked prince, who was the ruler of their country. 2 other boys followed Envy, and they agreed that what he had said was quite true. They also told the judge that they were afraid the pilgrims would do great harm to the children of Vanity Fair if they were allowed to be at liberty, because they laughed at the treasures with which the wicked prince had filled the city, and said they were not worth having, and they pretended that they knew of a finer city and another king whose laws were better than those of the wicked prince. There were 12 men sitting in the court whose duty it was to listen to everything that was said about the prisoners, and then help the judge to decide whether they deserve punishment or not. These 12 men were called the jury. Of course, they were chosen from among the chief servants of the wicked prince, and were not likely to be kind or just to any of the king's pilgrims. However, they always pretended to treat their prisoners fairly, so when Faithful asked if he might speak to them, the judge answered, "You ought to be put to death at once for all you have done, but we will hear first what you have to say." Christian wondered how it was that Faithful had become so brave. His face was pale, but he did not seem to be frightened, although the judge and the people in the court looked wicked and cruel. Christian afterwards knew that the king had helped his little pilgrim and had made the timid boy brave and strong, so that he was not afraid to speak out and own that he loved his king dearly and would obey no one else. When Faithful had spoken, the judge turned to the jury and said, "You have heard what Envy and his companions have told us about these boys, and Faithful does not deny it. He will not serve our prince, and by the laws of our city he ought to be put to death." Then the 12 men answered, "We can see that both these pilgrims are wicked boys, but Faithful is the worst, because he is not ashamed to speak against our prince. We think that he must be killed, but Christian can be taken back to prison." Poor little Christian's mind had been so troubled by all that had happened that he scarcely understood what the jury were saying, and when the soldiers of the wicked prince came in and led Faithful out of the court, he wondered where they were going. In a few minutes, too, he was taken into the marketplace, and there he saw his companion in the midst of those cruel men who were beating him and wounding him with sharp weapons. "Oh, Faithful, Faithful!" he cried out. But Faithful did not answer. He was looking up into the sky, and his face was shining with a beautiful light, like the face of Christian's mother when he saw her in his dream. Then Christian looked up also, and in the air, just above the place where Faithful was standing, he could see a band of angels with their wings outspread, and he knew that they were waiting to carry the soul of the little pilgrim to its home in the celestial city. Chapter 29. Little Christian leaves Vanity Fair. Little Christian knew that the angels would carry Faithful safely into the presence of the king. And as he thought of this, he forgot for a moment that he was in the midst of Vanity Fair, surrounded by the servants of the wicked prince. Suddenly the boys of the city gave a great shout of pleasure, because they loved to see a little pilgrim punished, and their cry startled Christian, so that he turned once more to look at his lost friend. But the king is very merciful, and he did not wish Christian to know how much poor Faithful had suffered. A mist seemed to pass before his eyes, and he cried out again, "Oh, Faithful, Faithful!" Then a strange feeling came over him, and he fancied that his mother had pushed her way through the crowd, and had lifted him in her arms and carried him away into an open space where there were no soldiers and no noisy, mocking children. There he lay for some time, feeling too weak to move or to speak, but presently he opened his eyes, and found that he was in the prison upon a little bed, and that a woman was bending over him. She was brightly dressed, like all the women in Vanity Fair, and although she did not look unkind, her face was very different from that of Christian's mother. She was the wife of the man who kept the prison, and when the little fainting boy had been carried from the marketplace by the soldier who had taken charge of him, she had been sorry to see him, so she brought some water and bathed his hands and face gently and stayed by him until he revived. "You poor little child," she said presently, "you are too young to be a pilgrim. I should like to keep you here and take care of you." "You are very kind to me," he said, "but I could not stay. I'm going to the king." "Ah," replied the woman, "I was going to the king once, but the way was hard, and I have been very happy here in the city." "You would be happier with the king," said Christian. "Faithful is gone. I saw the angels waiting for him, and if they ever let me out of prison, I shall travel as fast as I can to the end of my journey." The woman stroked the boy's soft hair. "Faithful is dead," she whispered. "I was sorry when they told me, but they're not going to kill you." "I don't think I would have minded," said Christian, "for then I should have gone straight to the celestial city, and now perhaps I shall be kept here always, or if not, I shall have to go the rest of the way alone." "They will only keep you in prison for a few days," answered the woman. "Stay with me. I'll be very kind to you." But Christian shook his head. "I couldn't stay. I love the king and I must go to him." After a few days, the keeper of the prison came to him and told him that the governor of the city had given an order for him to be set free, so Christian started once more on his journey. The kind woman was sorry to see him go, and she kissed him and bade him think of her always. "I'll tell the king how good you've been to me," said Christian, "and perhaps some day you will be a pilgrim again. If I see you coming into the celestial city, I shall know you." He went quietly down the street, not feeling strong enough yet to walk quickly, and fearing very much lest the boys should run after him as they had done before. But as Faithful had been put to death, they were satisfied, and although they laughed together when they saw the little pale-faced pilgrim pass by, they did not touch or interfere with him in any way. He was just going through the great archway of the city gate when he heard someone running behind him, and then he felt a hand on his shoulder. For a minute he was frightened, thinking that his troubles were beginning again. But the boy who had stopped him looked frightened too, and said in a half-whisper, "Let me come with you. I don't want to stay here any longer." "Do you mean that you will be a pilgrim?" said Christian. "Yes, my name is Hopeful, and I want to go with you. But wait until we are safely on the road, and then I'll tell you all about it." Chapter 30. By-ends. Christian tried to walk a little faster, and Hopeful kept close to him, but he seemed afraid to speak until they were some distance from the city. Then he said, "We were sorry, you know, because they killed Faithful. He was so brave, and I'm sure he was good. And there are some more boys and girls, too, who say that they will not stay in the city much longer if such cruel things are done there. I was just passing the prison when you came out, and I watched you, and then when no one was looking, I ran after you. You don't mind my coming, do you?" "Not if you really love the king," said Christian. "I thought I should have to go to the rest of the way myself, and I shall be very glad indeed if you will come with me." "Yes, I'll come," said Hopeful. "I wasn't happy, and I always meant to run away some day." Christian was beginning to ask how long Hopeful had been living in Vanity Fair when they overtook another boy who was strolling very slowly on the sunny side of the road. He came from a city not far from Vanity Fair. The people who lived in it called themselves the king's servants and pretended to love him very much, but whenever the wicked prince or his servants came to see them, they left off talking about the king and behaved as if the wicked prince were their ruler. The wicked prince liked these people, and when he heard that any of them had become pilgrims, he never tried to hinder them in their journey, because he knew that they would be sure to turn back again as soon as they met with the least difficulty or danger. The boy, whose name was By-ends, joined Christian and Hopeful and walked with them for a short time. He told them that all his relations and friends were very rich people, and he seemed proud of his high position and inclined to despise Christian and Hopeful. "Isn't it a beautiful day?" said Hopeful presently, for the sun was shining brightly and the breeze was soft and pleasant. "Yes," replied Byans, "it is just nice for traveling. But pilgrims from our city never start in the winter. We always choose clear summer weather for our journeys. It is foolish to tire yourself with struggling against wind and rain." "There are storms even in the summer," said Christian. "You needn't travel in them. If it begins to rain, I should creep under a thick bush until it was fine again." Christian could not help but smile, but he answered, "I am sure good pilgrims never do that. We ought not to mind about the weather." "Well, of course," said Byans, "you can do as you like. We need not quarrel about it. If there's a storm, you can walk in it if you choose, but I shall certainly wait until it's over." Now Christian had read in his book that it is unwise for pilgrims to have friends who are not the king's true servants, so he said, "I'm afraid if you think in that way, we shall not be good companions for you, for we must go straight on whether it is fine or stormy." "Very well," answered Byans, "you'd better go on by yourselves. I was very happy before you came, and I'm sure I don't want you to stay with me." "It was a pity to vex him," said Christian as he walked on with Hopeful, "but I don't see how we could help it. If we stayed with him and there happened to be a storm, he might persuade us to turn back altogether." Byans had really been feeling rather lonely and was very glad when Christian and Hopeful overtook him. But he was too idle and fond of his own comfort to be willing to serve the king faithfully as they wished to do. He put his hands in his pockets and tried to look as if he did not care when they left, although he felt almost inclined to run after them and say that he did not mind about storms any more than they did. "It wouldn't signify," he thought. "They couldn't make me go any farther than I wished, no matter how much I promised. They're silly boys, but their company would be better than none." But before Byans had made up his mind what to do, he heard shouts behind him, and turning around, he saw 3 of his schoolfellows beckoning to him to wait for them. "Where are you off to?" they cried as they came up to him. "There wasn't anything particular to do at home," said Byans, "so I thought I'd try to see what it was like to be a pilgrim." "We'll go with you. Who are those 2 boys in front? We saw you talking to them." "Oh, they're just pilgrims too," replied Byans, "but not our kind of pilgrims. They're the servants of the king. I told them I should only travel while the weather was fine, so they said I might stay by myself. I don't see the use of plodding over rough roads in wind and rain. You may just as well stop until the storm is over." "Of course," said one of the boys, "but the king's servants are always like that, and if you don't exactly agree to everything they say, they won't have anything to do with you. However, what does it matter? Leave them alone, and we shall be a nice little party all to ourselves."